She saw the children in her dreams. She remembered their names, their faces, and felt the unbearable pain of leaving them forever. But she wasn't their mother, not in this life. Jenny Cockell, a woman living in the United Kingdom, didn't just have vivid memories of a past life. She actually found the children she had once left behind, 60 years after she had died. This isn't a novel. This is a true story, documented in the acclaimed book Yesterday's Children. And it may lead you to ask yourself, do souls really exist? And if they do, where do they go when we die? Jenny Cockell was born in 1953 in the peaceful countryside of Barnet, north of London. Her family wasn't particularly religious, nor did they believe strongly in reincarnation or the afterlife. She was raised in a practical, down-to-earth way, where daily life revolved around health, work, and responsibility. But from as early as 3 or 4 years old, Jenny began talking about something no ordinary child would say. She spoke of having once been a woman named Mary, who lived in a small village in Ireland. A place with narrow dirt roads, grey stone walls, and children who called her mother. These weren't tales from books. They came in dreams, in quiet moments, or while staring out the window, as if another stream of memory had quietly slipped into her consciousness. And the strange thing was, these memories weren't vague or blurry. They were clear, coherent, and vivid, as if they had just happened yesterday. Jenny knew what it felt like to give birth as Mary. She knew the despair of being unable to protect her children from poverty and illness. She even remembered what it felt like to die. That haunting sensation of the soul separating from the body, powerless and full of regret. Her parents didn't know how to respond. To them, it was just the imagination of a child, maybe too much reading or daydreaming. They told her not to dwell on such things. They didn't punish her, but they didn't understand either. Jenny wasn't angry, but she learned to stay quiet. She knew no one would believe her, so instead of telling stories, she drew pictures. In her drawings, a small house, rolling hills, and sad-eyed children standing beneath gray rain. Even when she tried to forget, the dreams returned. In them, she was always back in that same place, reliving the feeling of being a mother, losing her children, and dying all over again. And each time she awoke, she carried one very real emotion: guilt. A guilt so heavy, it followed her like a silent shadow. As if, even in a new body, she had left something undone in a previous life. That unspoken wound stayed with her, through childhood, through her teens, and into adulthood. And then, a quiet question began to take root inside her. If Mary really existed, where are her children now? Are they still alive? Do they remember their mother? And maybe, just maybe, could she find them again, to apologize, to hold them, to finish what death had interrupted? What Jenny didn't know then was that this single question would open a door, one that led far beyond space and time, and deep into the forgotten truth of who she really was. From a young age, Jenny Cockell knew she was different. Not because she had special powers, but because, deep inside her, it felt like two lives were being lived at once. One life was her own, a little girl growing up in the English countryside, with parents and siblings, surrounded by the ordinary rhythms of daily life. But the other life was not so ordinary. It was quiet, painful, and full of longing. It belonged to Mary, an Irish mother who had died young, leaving behind 8 small children in poverty. The memories of Mary didn't fade over time. Instead, they seemed to grow alongside Jenny. As she matured, she realized these memories weren't just childish imagination. They were deep emotional imprints, vivid, persistent, and burdened with guilt. In her teenage years, Jenny tried to live like a normal girl. She went to school, made friends, and pursued hobbies. But the dreams didn't stop. Night after night, the same scenes played like a slow-motion film. She dreamed of Mary dying in a hospital bed, arms stretched out to her children, unable to reach them. Sometimes she woke up crying, overwhelmed by a guilt she couldn't explain. In her book Yesterday's Children, Jenny wrote, "I couldn't explain it. I just knew. I was someone who had once left. And that made my heart ache every single day." As she grew older, got married, and had children of her own, that feeling didn't disappear. In fact, it became stronger. When she held her own children, she would suddenly remember the ones from her dreams. A part of her believed she had failed to be the mother she once was, in another lifetime. Then, in her early 30s, everything changed. The memories weren't just passive anymore. They felt like a call, a debt unpaid, a chapter left unfinished. It was as if a part of her soul was asking to be healed. Jenny began to write journals, sketch maps, and list names and places from memory. She asked herself, was Mary real? Who were her children? If they were still alive, could she find them? And if she did, would they recognize something of their mother in her? She wasn't searching for proof. She wasn't trying to convince anyone. She was searching for peace, for healing, for reconciliation with a part of herself that never truly rested. The soul's memory, a scientific spiritual perspective. In the field of consciousness and reincarnation research, some scientists speak of cellular soul memory, the idea that deep emotional experiences can outlive physical death, stored in a field of soul-level awareness and carried forward into the next life. Jenny's case seems to fit this theory completely. Coherent, consistent memories since childhood. Deep emotional bonds she couldn't logically explain. A strong desire to reconnect and make amends. According to researchers like Dr. Jim Tucker and the late Dr. Ian Stevenson, cases like Jenny's may not be just mystical. They might be evidence that human consciousness survives bodily death. And so, with a heart full of hope, a soul burdened by memory, and a hand-drawn map based on nothing but fragments of the past, Jenny Cockell set out on a journey to find the children she believed had once called her mother, more than half a century ago. There's something strange about longing. Sometimes it doesn't need a reason to exist. And for Jenny Cockell, that longing became a kind of invisible compass, guiding her across time, across lifetimes, toward a past she could never quite let go. Once she was certain the woman in her memories was named Mary Sutton, Jenny began her real investigation. There was only handwritten letters, landline phones, old paper maps, and a heart full of fragmented memories, faint, yet as vivid as yesterday. Some journeys don't begin on a map. They begin in a restless heart. For Jenny, Ireland wasn't just a country. It was a piece of herself still alive in another time. A door in her soul that had never truly closed. With a hand-drawn map based on pure memory, Jenny flew to Malahide, a small seaside town just north of Dublin. This was where Mary Sutton had once lived. And the moment she stepped foot there, something unexplainable happened. "I knew every street," she said. "I knew which house had the round window. I knew which one had the broken wooden fence. This wasn't déjà vu. This was, I have lived here." She visited churches, searched public records, asked locals. And eventually, she found it. Mary Sutton, a mother of 8, who had died in 1932, right after giving birth to her last child. Every detail aligned. The time period, the poverty, the cause of death, the number of children, even the exact house location. There was no doubt anymore. Mary was her. She was Mary. But Jenny didn't make the journey for recognition. She wasn't looking for validation or to be believed. She didn't need anyone to agree she was Mary reborn. She came only to say one thing to the children she had left behind: "I'm sorry." Even though Mary's death had not been her fault. The grief of that unfinished goodbye had stayed buried deep within Jenny's soul. She later wrote, "I just wanted to know if they were okay. I couldn't go on with my life without knowing they had been loved." And safe. It wasn't fame. It wasn't curiosity. It was a mother's love, unshaken by death, unchanged by time. That gave Jenny the strength to keep going. In Jenny's search for Mary Sutton's children, the hardest part wasn't finding their addresses. It was answering one painfully human question. How do you tell someone that you are the mother they lost? Jenny thought about that moment hundreds of times. She wrote letters, then rewrote them, then tore them up and started again. She wasn't trying to shock anyone. She wasn't looking for attention, and she certainly didn't want to be seen as crazy. All she wanted was a quiet confirmation that the love she had carried in her heart for decades was real. Jenny began contacting local churches, charities, and government offices in Malahide to trace the children of Mary Sutton, the woman she believed had died in 1932. Eventually, through public records and some replies, she tracked down 2 surviving sons, Sonny and Frank. Both now in their 60s, she didn't claim to be Mary reincarnated. Instead, she gently explained in her letter that she had strange, vivid memories about a woman named Mary, her children, and their life in Ireland, and that she was simply trying to understand why. She even apologized in advance in case her message caused confusion or discomfort. But to her surprise, they didn't reject her. Sonny, the eldest son, responded with politeness, caution, but also curiosity. He wanted to hear more. After a few letters, they spoke on the phone. At first, his tone was guarded, but as Jenny described specific details, the childhood home, the creaky wooden table, the corner of the kitchen where Mary used to cry when she thought the children were asleep, Sonny went silent. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "Only Mom would know that." There was nothing more to say. They arranged to meet at a modest guest house in the outskirts of Dublin. Jenny brought her husband for support, but inside her heart was pounding like she was stepping into a different lifetime. When the door opened, the first face she saw was Sonny. His eyes bright, his face familiar, like something once cradled in her arms. They stood in silence for a few seconds. She didn't hug him. He didn't cry. But in that moment, in their eyes, they knew. They began to talk, not like strangers, but like 2 souls piecing together a memory that had been torn apart. Jenny recalled things no one else could have known. The time Mary sewed her daughter's dress using an old shirt. The tin box where Sonny hid his first love letter. The salted potato stew Mary used to make when there was no money for meat. Later, Frank, the younger son, arrived. He didn't speak at first. He simply sat beside her, looked at her face, and said, "If Mom were still alive, I'd be sitting next to her right now." Jenny never expected to be accepted. But what passed between them had nothing to do with logic. It was emotional memory. A kind of truth that the mind can't fake, and science can't measure. In the days that followed, they didn't talk much about reincarnation. They just spent time together, sitting in silence, walking like family reunited after a long time apart. Every little gesture, the way Jenny touched their shoulders, the way they said her name, felt natural, familiar, like a family once broken was finally whole again. And perhaps what they recognized wasn't the return of a person, but the return of a love that had never left. A love that had only transformed and waited for the right moment to come home. In depth psychology, it is said, emotional memory doesn't need words, only recognition. Jenny hadn't come to relive a past life. She came to give herself, and the children once left behind, a chance to heal, a chance to close the circle. She didn't need science to prove it. She didn't need the world to believe. All she needed was for 2 sons to take her hand and say, "We know you didn't leave us, Mom." That meeting didn't change the world, but it changed the lives of the people in it. For Jenny, those children were no longer dreams, and for them, Mary, the mother who died in 1932, was no longer just a memory. She had returned. Just as love always does, when you need it the most. At first glance, Jenny Cockell's story might sound unbelievable, like something out of folklore or fantasy. But when people witnessed the way Mary's children, now elderly, sat in silence, shed tears, and called a stranger mom, the skepticism began to fade, giving way to a deeper, more profound question. What allows a human being to move beyond logic? To believe in something invisible, a returning soul? After publishing her memoir, Yesterday's Children, in 1993, Jenny's story quickly drew widespread attention. Major newspapers in the UK and Ireland covered it, followed by international media in the US and beyond. In 2000, her story was adapted into a made-for-TV movie of the same name, with acclaimed actress Jane Seymour playing the lead role. But what moved audiences wasn't the mystery. It was the honesty. The quiet way Jenny never claimed anything with certainty, never demanded belief. She was simply searching for something unfinished, and she found it. Researchers like Dr. Ian Stevenson and Dr. Jim Tucker, who spent decades studying thousands of past life memory cases, have called Jenny's story a rare, highly credible, and deeply human case. According to reports from the Society for Psychical Research, Jenny's memories, including Mary's death, the number of children, addresses, and living conditions, matched official records that were not publicly accessible. But perhaps the most extraordinary validation came not from documents, but from Mary's children themselves. Two elderly men, with no biological or social ties to Jenny, recognized in her something no science could explain. So why did Sonny and Frank, now in their 60s, accept a younger woman from another country as a continuation of their mother's soul? No one pressured them. They were not paid, and yet, they believed. Because when Jenny spoke of moments only Mary could have known, they didn't just hear it, they felt it. Her memories reached a part of them deeper than logic, where human beings store love, loss, and longing. Many people have experienced déjà vu, that eerie feeling of having been somewhere before. In Jenny's case, Sonny and Frank felt the presence of something old within someone new. A hug, a look, a voice. Something stirred that words could not explain. There is a theory in spiritual psychology known as resonant memory, the idea that souls once connected will remember each other. Even if they return in different bodies, their energy still resonates, triggering a sense of belonging without proof, without logic. In a way, they didn't recognize Jenny with their eyes. They recognized her with their hearts. Perhaps what Jenny carried wasn't just memory, but a form of love that had never finished its course. A love that didn't ask to be believed, didn't need to be named, only to be returned, even if late, and maybe, somewhere deep in their souls. Those sons had been waiting for their mother to come back. Not necessarily in the same body, but as a familiar presence bearing the love once interrupted. Jenny Cockell's story is not easy to categorize. It blurs the lines between life and death, between memory and imagination, between science and soul. But that's precisely why it touches something so deeply human, our need to be understood, to be forgiven, and to come home. Jenny didn't embark on this journey to prove reincarnation. She went to complete a story left unfinished, and in doing so, she gave those once lost children, and millions of others who heard her story, a glimmer of light, in the places where questions have never had answers. Perhaps the life we're living now, with our name, our body, and our memories, is just one small chapter in the infinite book of the soul. Stories like Jenny Cockell's remind us of something important. Not everything that is real can be seen or measured, but that doesn't make it any less true. Maybe you've dreamed of a place you've never been. Maybe you've met someone and felt like you've known them forever, from the very first moment. Or maybe you've carried